Hello everyone, and welcome to the second module of the Indigenous Climate Action Program. My name is Leanne and I am the lead youth educator with ICAP. Today we are talking about water and just how wonderful it is. Mother Earth, not to mention our bodies, are made up of roughly 70% water. And this water actually cycles around the Earth, moving from the oceans, rivers, lakes, glaciers, and other bodies of water, even puddles, into the atmosphere and back to Earth as precipitation in a process called the water or the hydrological cycle. Not only is water essential to all life, it is also home to hundreds of thousands of aquatic species, plants and animals and invertebrates, with some people estimating that over 90% of aquatic species have yet to be identified. It's pretty cool, right? Of the many aquatic species and food webs that exist, salmon play a crucial role in linking the ecosystems of ocean and river. Throughout their lives, salmon provide food for other fish, for animals and birds and insects in both marine and freshwater environments. Salmon sustain communities and are both an important source of food for humans and are of deep cultural significance for many Indigenous nations. They have been a source of food and spiritual inspiration to coastal and interior communities for thousands of years. With that in mind, it is my great pleasure to introduce to you Chris Cook, who is here to talk to us about what salmon and ultimately water means to his community.
Nuguam ogwilakame. Gaitan lacha Namgis, lacha quakakiwab. Gaitan lacha Elise. I just said that my name, I gave you my native name. I'm from a little village called Alert Bay, and my tribe is the Namgis tribe, and I'm from the Quaquaquoig Nation. With the Quaquaquoig worldview, it goes way back. In the animal world, a lot of our old stories talk about land and animals and things before human beings were. So the stories talk about how humans came after the animals. So because they came after, human beings came after animals, animals have a lot more wisdom. They have a lot more life experience collectively. And when the humans came along, they had to be taught by the animals how to live properly in harmony with nature. A big part of that with the salmon is the salmon are so abundant. And we lived off them primarily. But because our worldview, the Quaquaquoig worldview, sees the animals and the creatures and all of the forces in nature as equal, if not greater, than human beings, which is different than the Western point of view. So when you have this, the salmon coming up the river, and when our people were harvesting them, they call them the supernatural ones because we depended on them. There are deer, there are other fish, there are clams, there are these other creatures. We depended primarily on salmon to live. Because they're also a people, we have an agreement with the salmon people. And that agreement is based on nature and the world that we live in that happens in a cycle. So everything is born, it lives its life and it dies, but then it's reborn to start over again. The traditional fishing methods depended a lot on the geography that you're fishing in. If you're in a river, you would use different methods than if you're out in the ocean. Because the technologies didn't exist, like the purse seines that they have now or the gill netting technology, most of the fish would be caught when the salmon were going up the river. And you would have, with our people, different homes. You'd have the summer homes and you have the winter homes. So in the seasons when the fish were going up the river and the different species had their different times they would be going up, our people would be going up to the river to harvest the fish out of the river. They had their fish camps, and they called it wiwamis. The traditional way that we were taught, was given, let me put it that way, the way that was given to us of how to relate to the nature and all the gifts and the things that were given to us is you only take what you need, right? You only take what you need to live on. That's the agreement that nature and all the animals gave to us. If you take too much, it throws everything out of balance. And a huge part of that balance is having the respect for the salmon, for the forest, for nature and the cycles that happen. When we stop seeing the sacredness, when we stop seeing how delicate the balance is within nature, when we refuse to take only what we need, it throws all of those cycles out of balance. And the wisdom that has been given to tribal peoples, and you got to remember we all started as tribal peoples, is we have to make sure the cycle continues in a healthy way for the next generations. It was done for us. Our ancestors took care of the cycles, took care of the offerings, took care of their relationship to the land, to the animals, so that we can have it. And the teachings that go with that are about balance. And when we step outside of that and no longer follow that, we suffer. And the world that we're living in today is a direct result of us not taking care of the cycles like we've been taught to. And the climate change is a byproduct of that, because we're not taking care of the forest. We're not living up to our agreements that we have with the animals and with the elements like the water.
So how are salmon so intricately linked to the fresh and saltwater systems? Well, very briefly, in the ocean, salmon will eat small fish and other food. These sea nutrients help to actually make salmon itself a very rich source of food from which humans and other creatures can benefit. An adult salmon will return to their home stream to spawn, and when they do, and they have finished spawning and they die, well, then their decaying bodies actually become food for scavengers, ravens, crows, bears. And so when these salmon carcasses, these salmon bodies are at the side of the water, they will actually help to slowly fertilize riverside plants and trees as their bodies break down. Or if the salmon bodies get carried into the forest, then they actually also help to fertilize the trees and the forest as well. So they actually end up providing a habitat and a food source for the young salmon that have just spawned. Aquatic insects will also thrive on these nutrients, and they will help nourish and provide food for the next generation of salmon. And so the cycle sort of begins again and is renewed. And just like the water cycles around and through Earth, there is also a cycle with the salmon. So thinking about salmon, about the rivers, the lakes, the oceans, sometimes humans can actually create problems for the salmon and the river system. So what can we do to help take care of the water? Well, let me give you a couple of ideas at least. Obviously, if you are a fisher person, you want to make sure you always have your license and practice safe, sustainable fishing practices. If you are in and around a river, well, you can leave the logs and the driftwood there that you find, because that actually will help to preserve the salmon habitat. Other options, if you're going out for a walk or a hike, bring a bag with you. Pick up some garbage so that doesn't end up in our river or our water systems. or you can see what sort of projects are going on in your own community. Maybe there's a stream restoration project or a garbage removal day, or sometimes people will even go around and mark storm drains with yellow fish to remind people in their community that the water that goes into those storm drains goes directly into our ocean, because we don't want to dump things like chemicals down into those storm drains, because that will ultimately end up in the habitat where the salmons live. Finally, here Chris provides insight into what salmon mean to his nation and their importance, how the salmon are intricately linked within his nation's histories and practices.
When twins are born, twins come from the salmon people. So if a couple is gifted with twins, it's said that the salmon people came and gifted those twins to that people. And the firstborn of the twins is considered the head of the salmon. The second of the twins is considered the tail. So when they have a salmon dance in our potlatch, our ceremonies or our feasts, the oldest of the twin comes out first. The rest of the family goes in the middle because they're considered the body of that salmon. And the second born of the twins comes at the end because he completes or she completes that. Salmon is still the foundation of our feasts that we have. When we have our gatherings, we have barbecued salmon, we have smoked salmon, we have salmon eggs, we have, there's all those different. So the younger generation is raised in that. Because salmon is so important to our people and always has been, always will be, I grew up in a family that fished. They're fisher people. The men traditionally would go out and they would catch the fish, and the ladies were the expert fish cutters. So we were brought up in it. We had salmon. The salmon were cooked in many different ways so that they would have a different flavor. It was just we were raised in it. So when we were little kids, we would be taught that dance, and we would be sent out and to do that dance. We have songs for everything. We have songs for when you pull bark off the trees. We have songs to help things grow. We have songs for all of those things. And it wasn't that long ago that it sounded absurd. Oh no, that's just hocus pocus. And some of the scientists are, they put in classical music into the greenhouse, and they say, wow, the plants grow better with music. It's like the tribal peoples were taught this. So there's wisdom in there, right? There is wisdom. The songs, the prayers, the lessons, especially about taking only what you need. That needs to be brought back for all of us. Doesn't matter what race we all are affected by the cycles when they're out of balance. Mm-hmm. Our part when we harvest the salmon is that once we're done, we take the bones and it must go back into the water. Those bones find their way back home, the flesh is put back on the bones, and they start their life once more. That's what we were taught. Mm-hmm. So that's our tradition. Mm-hmm. We also, because we depend so heavily upon the salmon to live our lives, and to survive and to thrive and celebrate. We also have songs, we have dances, we have prayers to honor that offering that the salmon people give to us.